The alarm started as a soft pulse in the monitoring station, then grew louder with each passing second. Junior sensor operator pressed her six-fingered hands against the display screen, her eye stalks twitching in confusion. The readings made no sense. Something had entered the outer detection grid of the Empire's home system, and it was moving faster than anything she had ever seen. She checked the sensors twice, then three times. The numbers didn't change. The object was traveling at 87% the speed of light in real space. That was impossible. No civilization in the known galaxy traveled that fast without using jump gates or hyperdrive corridors. Real space had limits. Physics had rules. Yet there it was, burning across her screen like a meteor made of light itself. Triggered the emergency alert. Within moments, her supervisor arrived, his purple skin turning pale as he read the data. He immediately contacted Fleet Command. The message went up the chain faster than the mysterious object was traveling through space, and within 20 minutes, it reached the desk of Supreme Commander. Had served the Empire for 300 cycles. He had commanded fleets against rebel colonies, negotiated with hostile species, and maintained peace across 40 star systems. In all that time, he had never received a report that made his blood run cold. Until now. He stood in the command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the intruder's path. His military staff gathered around him, their various alien features all sharing the same expression of disbelief and fear. The object was heading directly toward Prime, the throne world of the Empire. It would arrive in less than 2 days at its current speed. Pull every record, ordered. I want to know what species this belongs to. Check all 847 civilizations. Someone must have developed this technology. The research teams worked through the night. They compared the energy signature against every known propulsion system in the galactic database. They analyzed the craft's trajectory, looking for clues about its origin. They searched for any species that might have made a breakthrough in faster-than-light travel without the Empire knowing about it. They found nothing. The energy signature was crude, almost primitive. It showed characteristics of fusion propulsion, the kind of technology that most spacefaring civilizations abandoned thousands of years ago when they discovered more efficient methods. But no fusion drive should be capable of those speeds. The energy output required would be astronomical, and the stress on any physical hull would tear it apart. Yet the object remained intact and showed no signs of slowing down. Ordered the fleet to intercept. The pride of the military, the fastest interceptors ever built, launched from their orbital docks. They could cross the system in hours, traveling through hyperspace corridors that bent reality itself. Their crews were confident and well-trained. They had never failed to catch a target. The interceptors dropped out of hyperspace ahead of the unknown craft, ready to match its speed and force it to stop. But when they tried to pace it, their engines screamed in protest. The object wasn't just fast, it was accelerating. The crews watched in horror as the distance between them grew larger. Their instruments showed the craft pulling away at a rate that shouldn't be possible. "It's still accelerating," the lead pilot reported, his voice tight with confusion. "Commander, nothing can accelerate that hard. The G-forces would any biological crew. Even with the best inertial dampeners, they should be paced inside that hull." But the craft kept accelerating anyway. Back at Fleet Command, panic began to spread through the ranks. Officers who had spent centuries studying warfare found themselves facing something they couldn't explain. The craft didn't respond to any hails. They broadcast messages in all 847 known languages. They used every frequency and communication protocol in the galactic standard. The craft remained silent. Made the hardest decision of his career. He ordered the evacuation of the imperial family from Prime. The news spread through the capital city like wildfire. Citizens who had lived their entire lives under the protection of the Empire's military might suddenly face the reality that something out there was beyond their control. Defense platforms around the planet powered up weapons that hadn't been fired in anger for generations. 300 warships moved into defensive positions, creating layers of protection around the throne world. If the unknown craft was hostile, it would face firepower capable of shattering moons. But would it be enough? That question haunted every commander in the fleet. The research teams continued their desperate search for answers. They traced the craft's trajectory backward, trying to determine where it came from. The path led to an empty region of space, a sector that had been surveyed multiple times over the centuries. The probes had found nothing there except primitive star systems with no signs of advanced life. One young researcher named made an observation that changed everything. She noticed that the energy signature, while crude, showed signs of incredible efficiency. The fusion reactions were being controlled and channeled with a precision that spoke to advanced engineering, even if the underlying technology was ancient by galactic standards. "What if," she said carefully to her supervisor, "what if they don't have faster-than-light travel at all? What if this is their fastest?" Her supervisor stared at her. "That's ridiculous. No species would attempt interstellar travel at speeds. It would take decades, even centuries, to cross the distances between stars. No rational being would subject themselves to that." But the more they looked at the data, the more theory made sense. The craft wasn't using any technology the Empire recognized because it wasn't trying to cheat physics. It was simply brute forcing its way through space with raw power and determination. As the craft entered the inner system, it finally began to decelerate. The watching fleet measured the deceleration rate and felt their confidence shatter completely. The object was slowing down at forces that should have destroyed it. Whatever was inside that hull was either dead or built very, very differently than any known species. Watched the approaching craft on his displays. It was smaller than he expected, barely the size of a Corvette-class vessel, but it had crossed distances that would take his fastest ships days to travel using hyperspace, and it had done so in real space. The implications were staggering. "Open all communication channels," he ordered. "I want to know what's inside that thing." The craft finally responded. The signal was weak and distorted, using a radio frequency so primitive that the Empire systems almost didn't recognize it as communication. The translation computers struggled with the language, processing sounds and patterns that matched nothing in their databases. After several minutes, words began to form. The voice was artificial, clearly computer-generated, speaking through a translation algorithm that was working in real time. "This is Spacecraft Wanderer, we come. Humanity peaceful, contact." Humanity. The word meant nothing to anyone in the command center. Dozens of researchers immediately began searching for references to this species. They found nothing. Humanity did not exist in any galactic record. They had never been contacted, never been surveyed, never been among the 847 known spacefaring civilizations. Felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. True fear. Not fear of defeat or death, but fear of the unknown. An entire species had appeared from nowhere, traveling at impossible speeds with impossible technology, and the Empire knew nothing about them. "Ask them their point of origin," he commanded. The response took longer this time as the translation algorithms improved. "Earth, star system, your designation sector 447J distance, approximately 42 light-years from current position." 42 light-years. The numbers hit the command center like a physical blow. At the speeds the craft had been traveling, that meant it had been in space for decades. The Empire's scouts had surveyed that sector only 30 years ago and found nothing but a yellow star with primitive planets. Whatever humanity was, they had gone from pre to interstellar travel in less than a generation. Or they had been traveling for far, far longer than seemed reasonable. "Request permission. To enter orbit we seek dialogue and friendship." Looked at his officers. They looked back at him with uncertainty written across their alien features. The Empire had protocols for first contact, procedures refined over thousands of years of encountering new species. But those protocols assumed the Empire was in control, that they were the ones with superior technology and knowledge. This time, they weren't sure what they were dealing with. "Grant them permission to enter high orbit," said finally, "but keep all defense platforms locked on their position, and get me every scientist who specializes in xenobiology and first contact procedures. I want to know everything about these humans before we let them set one foot on Prime." As the Wanderer glided into orbit around the throne world, a billion looked up at the sky and wondered what had just arrived at their doorstep. The Empire had stood for 12,000 cycles, secure in its power and knowledge. But in the span of 2 days, that security had been shaken to its core. Somewhere in the depths of space, 42 light-years away, there was a species called humanity. They had looked at the stars and decided to reach them, regardless of the cost or the time required. They had built a craft that could travel at speeds that conventional wisdom, and they had piloted it across the void for decades. And if this was just their first ship, what else might be coming? The shuttle approached the Wanderer slowly, scanners active and weapons armed despite the peaceful nature of the mission. Inside the shuttle, lead scientist and his team have prepared themselves for first contact with an unknown species. They wore environmental suits as a precaution, unsure what atmosphere or biological hazards they might encounter. The Wanderer grew larger in their viewport as they approached. Up close, it looked nothing like the sleek vessels of galactic civilization. The hull was and pitted from decades of micrometeorite impacts. Solar panels extended from the main body like broken wings, many of them damaged or missing. The fusion engines at the rear were massive, taking up nearly a third of the ship's total length. Everything about the design spoke of brutal functionality over elegance. "Look at those impact craters," one of the scientists whispered. "This ship has been flying for a very long time." The Wanderer's airlock opened to receive them. The team entered cautiously, scanning everything. The interior was cramped and utilitarian. Pipes and cables ran along every surface, many of them wrapped in what appeared to be primitive repair materials. The lighting was harsh and uneven. There was no artificial gravity, forcing them to use their magnetic boots to walk. They moved through narrow corridors until they reached what appeared to be a common area. And there, waiting for them, were the humans. 4 of them floated in the zero gravity, using handholds to keep themselves stable. They were bipedal, covered in simple clothing that looked worn and patched. Their skin was various shades of brown and pink, their hair different colors and lengths. They had 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs. By galactic standards, they were remarkably ordinary in appearance. But their eyes held something extraordinary. Despite being surrounded by an alien delegation from an empire that could destroy their home world with ease, the humans showed no fear. Instead, they looked curious, excited, even joyful. One of them pushed forward, a female by best guess. She spoke in the human language, and the translation device rendered her words into. "Welcome to the Wanderer. I'm Captain Sarah. These are my crew, Dr. James Park, Engineer Lisa, and Pilot. We've been waiting a long time to meet you." Bowed in the traditional greeting, "I am lead scientist of the Empire. We have many questions." "I imagine you do," Captain said with a strange expression that would later learn was called a smile. "Please, let's go to the observation deck. It's more comfortable there, and you should see what we've seen." They followed the humans through more cramped corridors. His team took detailed scans of everything. The technology was shockingly primitive. Manual controls everywhere, computer systems that looked decades behind galactic standards, life support that seemed barely adequate. How had these beings survived in this tin can for years? The observation deck was a small room with a curved window looking out at Prime. The humans had clearly spent much of their time here. Personal items were attached to the walls with strips of adhesive tape. Photographs of what must be Earth, handwritten notes, small mementos from home. "We launched from Earth 42 years ago," Captain began without being asked. "We were asleep for most of it, in cryogenic suspension, but we each took turns staying awake for 6 months at a time to maintain the ship and monitor our progress. I've been conscious for 7 years total spread across the journey. The others, similar amounts." Struggled to process this information. You were traveling for 42 years. That would mean you've spent more than half your natural in space. More than half, yes, agreed. We left Earth when I was 28 years old. I'm 70 now. We all are, give or take a few years. We knew it would be a one-way journey. By the time we return, everyone we knew will be dead or very old. The other scientists exchanged shocked looks. "Why?" asked. "Why would you volunteer for such a thing?" Engineer spoke up, his voice carrying emotion that the translator struggled to convey. "Because someone had to be first. We detected your radio signals 44 years ago. We heard voices from the stars, and we knew we weren't alone in the universe anymore. Earth had to respond. We had to reach out." "But surely you could have waited," protested. "Waited for better technology, faster ships." Dr. Park shook his head. "Humanity doesn't wait very well. We had the technology to build this ship, so we built it. We had the ability to reach you, so we came. In the time we've been traveling, Earth has built better ships, yes, but we're still the first. That matters to us." Captain pulled up a display on one of the primitive computer screens. It showed a map of local space with trajectories marked across it. "We're not alone out here. There are 17 other ships in flight right now, heading to different star systems. Some of them launched before us. Some launched after. They're all one-way journeys. They're all crewed by volunteers who knew they'd spend decades in space." Felt his blood run cold. 17 ships, all traveling at these speeds. "These speeds or slower," confirmed. "The Wanderer is actually one of the faster designs. Some of the generation ships will take over a century to reach their destinations. Those crews will raise children in space, children who will raise more children, all born knowing they'll die before the journey ends." The implications crashed through his mind like a tidal wave. "Generation ships," he repeated numbly. "You're sending out ships that won't arrive for over a century." "That's right," Pilot said. "And Earth is building more. We've got the shipyards running constantly now. By the time we left, there were plans for hundreds more missions, maybe thousands. Humanity has decided to spread across the galaxy, and we're not letting the speed of light stop us." One of the scientists, a young female named, spoke up hesitantly. "But the isolation, the loneliness, being trapped in these small spaces for so many years, how do you endure it?" The 4 humans looked at each other, and something passed between them that couldn't quite identify. A shared understanding, perhaps. A bond forged in the depths of space. "You endure it because it matters," said simply. "You endure it because humanity has been alone since we first looked up at the stars and wondered if anyone else was out there. 42 years in space is nothing compared to the 100,000 years we spent wondering. We're here now. We made contact. Every difficult day, every moment of doubt, every sacrifice we made was worth it for this." Began his examination of the crew with their permission. The medical scans revealed beings who had suffered greatly during their journey. Their bones showed signs of density loss despite the crew's exercise regimen. Their cardiovascular systems had weakened. They had been exposed to radiation levels that would be considered dangerous by galactic standards. All 4 showed signs of accelerated aging. But they were alive, functional, and mentally sound. More than that, they were optimistic and eager to learn. Dr. Park gave a tour of the ship systems. The scientist explained how they had dealt with countless equipment failures during the journey, how they had cannibalized non-essential systems to repair critical ones, how they had rationed food and water and air when recycling systems broke down, how they had lived with the constant fear that one failure, one miscalculation, would mean death light years from home. "Why not turn back?" asked. "When things went wrong, why continue forward?" Park looked at him with those strange human eyes. "Because going back would have meant it was all for nothing. As long as we kept moving forward, there was purpose. There was meaning. We chose this mission knowing it might kill us. Turning back would have been a worse death than anything space could do to us." Engineers showed them the propulsion systems. The fusion engines were masterworks of brute force engineering. They operated at temperatures and pressures that should have destroyed them years ago, but clever design and constant maintenance had kept them running. Backup systems had backups, and those had backups. The entire ship was built on the assumption that everything would eventually break. "We design for failure," explained. "We assume every component will malfunction at the worst possible time. So we build in redundancy and make sure we can repair anything with the materials we have. It's not elegant, but it works." Examined the life support systems and felt horror and admiration in equal measure. The recycling efficiency was remarkable given the primitive technology. The humans had managed to create a closed ecosystem that kept 4 people alive for decades with minimal resupply. It was the kind of engineering that required not just intelligence but creativity and determination. As the tour continued, realized something profound. The humans hadn't reached the stars through superior technology. They had reached the stars through superior stubbornness. They had looked at an impossible problem and decided it wasn't impossible, just really, really hard. And then they had worked the problem until they solved it. Back in the observation deck, Captain pulled up more data on her primitive computer. "We need to be honest with you about something. We know you have faster-than-light travel. We've been monitoring your ship since we entered the system. We don't have that technology yet. We're still working on the theory behind it, but we're probably decades away from making it practical." She paused, looking out at Prime. "But we're not going to let that stop us. With or without FTL, humanity is going to the stars. We're already there, actually. We just move slower than you do. If you're willing to share your technology, we'd be grateful to learn. If not, we understand. We'll keep building ships and sending them out at speeds. It'll take longer, but we'll get there eventually." Felt something shift in his understanding of the universe. His people had always assumed that certain technologies were prerequisites for galactic civilization. Faster-than-light travel, artificial gravity, advanced energy generation. Without these things, interstellar travel was considered impractical if not impossible. But the humans had looked at that assumption and ignored it completely. They had decided that decades or centuries of travel time were acceptable costs, that sacrifice and suffering were reasonable prices to pay for reaching the stars. And they had done it, not through superior technology, but through sheer willpower. "How many humans are there?" asked quietly. "On Earth, about 8 billion when we left, probably closer to 9 billion now." 8 billion. The number staggered. Most species spread across multiple worlds long before their population reached such levels. But humanity was still confined to a single planet, bursting at the seams, looking outward with desperate hope. "And how many of those 8 billion would volunteer for a mission like yours?" Captain's smile grew wider. "Millions. We had to turn away volunteers. There are waiting lists for ships that haven't even been designed yet. Humanity has spent its entire existence looking up at the night sky and dreaming. Now that we know you're out there, now that we have the ability to reach the stars even if it takes decades, there's no shortage of people willing to make the journey." The team returned to their shuttle in silence. They had gone expecting to find either advanced aliens with secret technology or primitive beings who had stumbled onto something they didn't understand. Instead, they had found something far more disturbing. They had found a species that viewed impossible odds as merely inconvenient obstacles. As the shuttle flew back to the Fleet Command ship, composed his report for Supreme Commander. He chose his words carefully, knowing they would be read by the highest levels of imperial government. "The humans possess no superior technology," he wrote. "They have achieved their remarkable speeds through brute force engineering and complete disregard for the personal costs of space travel. They are willing to sacrifice decades of their lives, their health, and their connections to home in order to reach the stars. This is not a rational species by our standards. This is a species driven by something we do not fully understand, something they call curiosity or hope or determination." He paused, considering his next words. "Recommendation: treat humanity as a first-contact species of extreme interest. They are not a military threat in the conventional sense. However, their willingness to endure hardship for long-term goals makes them unpredictable. A species that sends generation ships into the void, knowing those aboard will die before reaching their destination, is a species that plans in timescales that exceed our normal strategic thinking." Final assessment: if humanity is willing to sacrifice this much simply to say hello, we must carefully consider what they will be willing to sacrifice when they have more concrete goals. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the Wanderer entered orbit around Prime. Representatives from 600 of the most influential civilizations gathered in the council chamber, a vast space station that floated in neutral territory between empires. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, a massive spherical room where delegates floated in assigned positions, their various life support needs met by the station's adaptive systems. Supreme Commander of the Empire had requested this session with the highest priority designation. Such requests were rare, usually reserved for galaxy-wide threats or major diplomatic incidents. The delegates arrived expecting news of war or disaster. What they got was something nobody had prepared for. Stood at the center of the chamber, his image projected to all corners so every delegate could see him clearly. His normally composed features showed signs of stress. He had not slept properly in days. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice carrying the weight of his position. "The Empire has made first contact with a previously unknown spacefaring species. They call themselves humanity, and they originate from a star system 42 light-years from our home world. Under normal circumstances, this would be a routine matter handled through standard first contact protocols. But these circumstances are far from normal." He activated a holographic display showing the Wanderer's approach to the system. The delegates watched in silence as the data scrolled past, showing speeds that made them murmur in disbelief. This vessel crossed 42 light-years of space in approximately 42 years using real space propulsion only. They have no faster-than-light capability. They achieved these speeds through fusion-based acceleration and decades of travel time. The crew has spent more than half their natural in space to reach us. The chamber erupted in discussion. Delegates from hundreds of species spoke over each other, their translation devices struggling to keep up. The concept of traveling for decades in real space was so foreign to modern galactic civilization that many simply couldn't process it. A delegate from the collective, a spider-like species known for their advanced physics research, spoke up. "That's absurd. No rational species would attempt such a journey. The psychological toll alone would be devastating. They must have some form of FTL we're not detecting." "We thought the same," replied. "We have examined their vessel extensively. There is no faster-than-light technology aboard. What they have instead is extraordinary engineering focused entirely on survival and redundancy. Their ship is designed to function for decades with minimal maintenance. Their crew trained for years before the mission, learning to repair every system from spare parts. They brought enough supplies to last the journey, with recycling systems that border on miraculous given their technological level." Another delegate, this one from the ancient and wise species, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "How many ships have they sent?" Took a breath. According to the Wanderer's crew, there are currently 17 other human vessels in flight to various star systems. Some have been traveling for over 50 years. Several are generation ships that will take over a century to reach their destinations, with crews that will live and die in space across multiple generations. The silence that followed was absolute. The implications sank in slowly, like water seeping into sand. Somewhere in the galaxy, there were human ships crawling through space at speeds, their crews aging and dying while they pursued destinations they might never see. There's more, continued. According to Captain of the Wanderer, Earth has established permanent shipyards dedicated to building more of these vessels. When she left Earth 42 years ago, there were plans for hundreds of missions. By now, with their technology advancing, there could be thousands in various stages of construction. The delegates' tentacles twitched in what had learned to recognize as deep thought. Do they know about the galactic community, about faster-than-light travel? They know now, said. They've been monitoring our communications and ship movements since they entered our system. Captain has directly acknowledged that they lack FTL technology. She has also made it clear that this will not stop their expansion into the galaxy. With or without our help, humanity intends to spread among the stars. A younger delegate from a warrior species called spoke up, his voice aggressive. Then we should stop them. Destroy this ship, blockade their home world, prevent them from spreading. An uncontrolled species with this kind of determination could destabilize the entire galactic order. Several other delegates voiced agreement, but the raised a tentacle for silence. That would require us to commit genocide against a species whose only crime is ambition. Moreover, I suspect it would fail. If humans are willing to send generation ships into the void, they will find ways to evade any blockade. They will hide their launches, disguise their vessels, send them in directions we're not watching. We would have to maintain perfect vigilance over their entire star system forever. Does anyone here believe that's possible? The delegate fell silent, but his posture remained hostile. Brought up new displays showing Earth itself. The scouts had completed their survey of the human home world. The delegates saw a blue planet teeming with life, covered in cities and infrastructure, wrapped in a thin envelope of atmosphere that looked terrifyingly fragile. 8 billion humans live on this single world, said. They have not yet established permanent colonies on other planets in their system, though they have temporary bases and stations. Their entire species is concentrated in one location, which makes them vulnerable. But it also gives them focus. Every human on this planet looks up at the sky and knows there are other worlds to reach. According to our intelligence, millions of them would volunteer for missions like the Wanderers. The limiting factor is not their willingness to go, but their ability to build ships fast enough. The council chamber filled with discussion again. Delegates from long-lived species found the humans shockingly short, which made their willingness to sacrifice decades even more impressive. Delegates from species with strong survival instincts couldn't understand why anyone would volunteer for such danger. Delegates from militaristic cultures worried about what humans might do with more advanced weapons. But one delegate, representing a species called the who were known for their poetry and philosophy, asked a different question. What do the humans want? Smiled slightly. According to Captain, they want to talk. They want to learn. They want to establish peaceful relations with the galactic community. They're curious about us, about our technologies, our cultures, our histories. They've been alone in the universe since they first gained consciousness as a species, and now that they know we exist, they want to understand everything about us. And if we share our faster-than-light technology with them, they asked. Then they will still send out the ships that are already in flight, said. Captain was very clear about this. Humanity does not retreat. The missions that have already launched will continue to their destinations, even if it takes decades longer than necessary. The crews volunteered knowing they might die before arriving. Calling them back now would dishonor that sacrifice. The delegate spoke again, his ancient voice thoughtful. I have lived for 800 years. I have seen many species join the galactic community, but I have never seen anything like this. Humanity is not joining us because they need our help or because we discovered them. They are joining us because they reached out first, across impossible distances, at terrible cost, simply because they wanted to know if we existed. That speaks to something fundamental about their nature. He paused, letting his words sink in. I propose we offer humanity full membership in the Galactic Council, along with immediate access to faster-than-light technology and the full benefits of galactic civilization. Not because we fear them, though perhaps we should, but because they have earned it. They crossed the void using nothing but determination and engineering. Imagine what they might accomplish with proper tools. The proposal sparked intense debate. Some delegates supported it immediately, moved by the human achievement. Others worried about introducing such an unpredictable element into galactic society. The discussion raged for hours. Finally called for a vote. The matter was too important to delay. As the votes came in, displayed on the central hologram, a clear majority emerged. 412 votes in favor of offering Humanity Council membership. 188 votes against. The remainder abstained. The decision made, transmitted the news to Captain aboard the Wanderer. The communication was broadcast across the council chamber, so all delegates could witness humanity's response. His face appeared on the holographic displays, tired and worn but smiling with genuine joy. On behalf of humanity, I accept the Galactic Council's offer with gratitude and humility. We look forward to learning from you, working with you, and contributing to the galactic community in whatever ways we can. Then she added something that made every delegate in the chamber pause. However, I want to be clear about one thing. The 17 ships currently in flight will continue their missions. We will not recall them. When they reach their destinations, we will use your FTL technology to catch up and provide support, but the missions themselves will proceed as planned. Humanity reaches forward. We do not turn back. The delegate spoke up angrily. That's absurd. Why let them suffer when you have the means to retrieve them? His expression became serious. Because they volunteered for those missions knowing they might spend their entire lives in space. Because calling them back would mean all those years, all that sacrifice meant nothing. Because the crews of those ships deserve to complete what they started. And because humanity needs to remember that we got here the hard way. We crossed the stars at speeds before we had any better option. That fact defines us, and we won't let it be forgotten. She paused, looking directly at the camera. When the generation ship Perseverance reaches the Alpha system 90 years from now, there will be children aboard who were born in space, who lived their entire lives between the stars. When they finally see a new sun for the first time, that moment will be sacred. We won't take that away from them by showing up early with a shortcut. The delegate made a gesture of respect. Your species will bring interesting perspectives to this council, Captain. I look forward to learning from you as much as you learn from us. Over the following weeks, diplomatic teams shuttled between Earth and Prime. Humanity's governments, fractured and diverse as they were, came together to negotiate their species' entry into galactic civilization. The process was complicated, but the humans proved to be quick learners and enthusiastic participants. Scientists from across the galaxy descended on Earth to study human technology and share their own knowledge. The humans absorbed information at a staggering rate, their educational institutions quickly adapting to include alien sciences and philosophies. In exchange, human engineers showed galactic researchers their approach to problem-solving, their emphasis on redundancy, and their willingness to use inferior technology if it was more reliable. The cultural exchange was equally profound. Humans learned that the galaxy was far older and more complex than they had imagined. Alien species learned that humanity's arts and literature were filled with stories about reaching for the impossible and succeeding against all odds. The theme appeared again and again in human culture, ordinary people doing extraordinary things through determination and sacrifice. 6 months after first contact, The first human delegation arrived at the Galactic Council Station using borrowed FTL technology. They were still learning to use the alien systems, still adjusting to the idea that you could cross light years in days instead of decades. But they adapted quickly. Captain Sarah was among that delegation. At 70 years old, her body worn from decades in space, she stood before the assembled council and formally accepted humanity's seat among them. She gave a speech that was later studied in courses across the galaxy. "We came here in a ship that took 42 years to build and 42 years to fly," she said. "We came here not knowing if you would welcome us or destroy us. We came here because humanity has spent our entire existence looking up at the stars and wondering if we were alone. Now we know we're not, and that changes everything." She gestured to the other human delegates, younger people who had made the journey from Earth in mere days using FTL technology. "These people are the future. They'll travel between the stars as easily as their ancestors traveled between continents. They'll grow up knowing aliens not as myths or dreams, but as neighbors and friends and colleagues. They'll take humanity's place in the galactic community and probably do a better job of it than my generation ever could. But I want you all to remember something. Remember the Wanderer and the 17 other ships still crawling through space at a fraction of light speed. Remember that humanity got here by refusing to accept that something was impossible. Remember that we built ships knowing we might die before we reached our destination, and we launched them anyway. Remember that we're stubborn, determined, and perhaps a little bit crazy by your